let's pivot now to the election, because this is one of the first thoughts, and we didn't want to think about it too quickly, right? Because
Sure.
it was still in the middle of a tragedy, but it was definitely like, oh, whoa, wait a second, we got an election coming up here in a little bit, and how is that going to work at all? So first of all, before we get to what changes they decided to do, do you think some changes needed to happen, or no? Could they, in the next 25 days, have pulled things together to go as normal?
We needed to make some changes. Early voting starts here a week from today. Absentee ballots had already been going out and being returned. We had a delay in our absentee ballot process because Robert Kennedy thankfully won his lawsuit to have his name removed from the ballot here in North Carolina. So that delayed our absentee ballots going out, but we already had absentee ballots hitting mailboxes, coming back to the boards of election across the state and here in this district. And we started to have this conversation Sunday after the storm. And it is difficult because you're seeing the suffering and the importance of the humanitarian effort, but we do have to be aware that we're coming up to what I would call the most, and I know you would as well, the most important election of our lifetime. And we needed to be ready. And when we started the conversations, we just didn't even know where we were, what was still standing, what truly was the devastation. And over the course of each and every day, a lot of conversations with myself, state party leadership, local party leadership, local emergency management, city managers, really getting a gauge of where we are county by county. And what I really like about the bill that our General Assembly passed yesterday is it puts all the control at the county level. The county boards of election get to determine if changes need to be made and what changes need to be made. There's the 5 far west counties in this congressional district weren't impacted by Helene at all. They're included in the emergency order because it looked like they were going to get hit, but they didn't really have any issues. They don't need to make any changes. Some of the counties like Avery County, and you've been showing some pictures of some others, Buncombe County, some of the areas where you see, I know that your listeners and viewers have seen Chimney Rock, which has washed into Lake Lugar. When you're seeing that picture of the lake with all the wood in it, that's a town that washed into a lake. So that community obviously hit much differently. So the control is now with the county boards of election. What changes do you need to make? Do you need to extend hours? Do you need to move locations, add additional early voting locations? And that latter one, the addition of early voting locations, has been a critical value add for all of us here in Western North Carolina because it allows us to put early voting sites at this point, this close to the election, in areas of the community that makes getting to the polls much easier for those who have been impacted by the storm. But I think the control at the county level is critical in protecting the election versus a state mandate with blanket changes that don't make sense for most communities.
Yes. Okay. That is encouraging. Because if like there was like, if all of a sudden, you didn't need to show ID in Charlotte,
right.
You'd be like, wait, hold on a second.
Oh, yeah.
That doesn't.
Well, and I'll tell you what the Democrats wanted, and all of our county boards and our state boards are controlled 3-2 by Democrats because we have a Democrat governor in North Carolina. That's how the law works here. They wanted drop boxes. They wanted to extend absentee balloting until canvassing, so we would have basically like 2 weeks after the election to turn in absentee ballots. They wanted to lift voter ID, and this is our first general election in North Carolina with voter ID. And there's already a provision if you've lost your ID because of a natural disaster. So the Democrats wanted to basically erase all of North Carolina election law and go carte blanche. Republicans stood firm, and we got to a bipartisan solution. One of the other components that I think is really great, Mike, is all these changes that happen at the county level must be bipartisan. So the Democrats can't ram through changes because they have a 3-2 majority. Republicans and Democrats have to agree on the changes.
Okay, hold on. This is interesting what you said. Tell me how this works again, because I was thinking, all right, this is good news that the counties have control over this.
Yeah.
And that's great. And but I was like, and this is especially good because I'm sure these counties are all Republican, so we can trust that this is going to be done well. But what are you saying about the county boards and the 3-2 majority? What is that?
Sure. So in the state of North Carolina, the political party of the governor controls the balance of power at the state on the Board of Elections and across all 100 counties. So we have a Democrat governor in North Carolina. I know that's a bit shocking for most people. They don't really think of us as we're a bit like Kentucky. We have a Democrat governor. Mm-hmm. So The state board of election is a 3-2 majority Democrat, and every one of the county boards of election is a 3-2 majority Democrat.
Whoa.
So
when you say the counties are in charge of these changes, is it the county board of elections that are you talking about like the local county government?
No, the county boards of election will vote.
Okay.
The meetings have already started. I've been attending them. They started this week to vote to make changes, adding locations, extending hours, moving a location.
Now I'm less encouraged because I assumed they would be all like 5-0 Republican, and now they're 3-2 Democrat. So what do you mean they have to be bipartisan? What does that mean?
So if a board puts forth a proposal to add an early voting site, Avery County, one of the most devastated counties in the congressional district at the very northern top, they have made the decision to add an early voting site. When the board votes on that, Republicans and Democrats both have to vote in support of it. So the Democrats can't vote 3-2 no. If the Republican that resolution is off the table, then Republicans and Democrats have to vote if they want to add an early voting site. At least one Republican has to vote with those Democrats in order for that.
I was going to ask one or two. Okay.
Yeah, just one.
Okay, interesting. Okay, well, how much? I just want to know how concerned I should be moving forward. How much trust do you have in these 13 board of elections to do the right thing?
I have great trust in them, and I've been at the meetings already. Okay. These are people that live in the community. The Democrats have been appointed by their local party. The Republicans have been appointed by their local party. The meetings are open. I've been working very closely with the Republicans on every one of our county boards of election to just address their needs, ask the questions, what is it that you need? Do you need another site? Do you need to consolidate precincts? And the good news is all 100 counties across the state of North Carolina, all 25 counties in the affected area, their boards of elections are open. They're functioning. We didn't lose any ballots. We didn't lose any tabulators. We didn't lose any locations. We have a couple schools that will be troubling when we get into Election Day. But as far as early voting goes, I feel really confident with the changes that have been made.
Okay. So I saw a Fox News report the other day, and they were acting as if the changes I'm going to speak about were already done. But you're suggesting that the changes the Democrats in the state wanted were not what ultimately happened. And those were the ones like no voter ID requirements. We're going to put drop boxes everywhere. We're going to vote online. Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned we can receive ballots up to 2 weeks after. Like those are crazy, like bad. Those are crazy bad. And even if they only happen in the devastated counties, I'm sure they could be somehow taken advantage of by people even outside those counties. And it's just, that seems to be ripe for fraud. So you're saying those four things did not happen, or at least it's up to the individual counties whether or not they want them to happen. But so far it has not happened, carte blanche.
They did not happen, and they are not available to happen. The bill is very clear on the changes they're allowed to make. And those changes are very simply regarding adding locations, changing hours, consolidating polling locations. So they cannot decide to go to online voting. Not an option. They cannot add a drop box. They cannot lift the state law on voter ID. None of those things can happen, and none of those things will happen. And one of the things that was so critical, and this is why having a Republican-led General Assembly is so important here in North Carolina, is there's no way to veto this. There's no way for the governor to try to override it. None of the county boards can go rogue. But we also recognize whatever we do now sets a precedent in North Carolina. And Mark Elias was, chomping at the bit to see what are we going to do. And the Democrats were chomping at the bit to see what are the Republicans going to do, because whatever we decided to do with this emergency action and this bill would set the standard for what happens when a hurricane hits eastern North Carolina, or if some type of devastation happens in a place like Charlotte, which is incredibly blue, and they would want to have drop boxes and online voting all over the place. So we knew we had to set a precedent that was going to be clean and clear, that would protect the integrity of the elections and didn't open Pandora's box to be wrought with fraud. We know this. There's only one way for Donald Trump to win the White House, and that's through the state of North Carolina. He carried it in 2016. He carried it in 2020. If you and I would have been talking 3 weeks ago, I would have said this election will be decided by a few precincts in Omaha, right? We were all looking at the map going, what are they doing in Nebraska? But I think that this election will really be decided by the God-fearing, hardworking people of Western North Carolina, the people that are going to take ATVs out of little mountain communities to get to the polls to vote, because they know clearly what Kamala Harris and Joe Biden think of them. They know what the Democratic Party thinks of them, and they know that Donald Trump is the only way to save this country. The motivation, energy, enthusiasm I'm hearing and seeing on the ground from people who are literally knee-deep in mud, they know how important this election is. They knew it before, and they surely know it now.
That is going to be a great story and a great visual of people hopping on mules to get out of their house in order to go vote. So when will these people in these counties, your county, be able to vote? When is early voting open, and can they mail in ballots?
So absentee ballots have already started to go out. People can request absentee ballots to be mailed to them. The Postal Service is working, again, depending on where you might be stranded. So they could vote by absentee ballot. That's not really the makeup of this congressional community. We're not a big absentee ballot area.
Yep.
And I don't anticipate we will be, especially in light of what's going on now. So I don't anticipate there'll be a high mail-in vote here in Western North Carolina. Early voting starts a week from today. The polls will open.
Okay.
People will be able to go and vote. Early voting runs until the Saturday before Election Day. We also have what are called MAT teams, or these multi-partisan assistance teams that are going to be, this is part of the bill as well. They're going to be deployed to go to shelters, nursing homes, to people who can't get out, we can come to them. And so everything will be available to get people to the polls and make sure that every single person has the ability to cast their ballot in this critical election. And, I think when we look at what's happening here on the ground in Western North Carolina, I'll share a couple stories that I hope will make you feel better about what's going on.
Yeah,
we were evacuated from our neighborhood, and that's not a knock on the door that you want at 7 a.m. from the National Guard, but we were evacuated because we had a mudslide. And as I was disembarking off of this National Guard truck into a parking lot in a little grocery store here in my town, coming down the hydraulic lift, my neighbor said to me, and she's not uber political at all, patted her fanny pack and said, "Michelle, I have my absentee ballot. Let's just fill it out while we're waiting." Now, mind you, we had about 90 seconds to evacuate, and she grabbed her absentee ballot. I had two men walk into on separate occasions this week, walk into one of my county GOP offices, so livid about the $750 response from Kamala Harris and FEMA, lifelong Southern Democrats, conservatives, but they changed their party affiliation on the spot to Republican. Had another man walk into one of my GOP offices and write a check and say, "I'll pay for all of your radio advertising until Election Day. We've got to get Donald Trump across the finish line." So the enthusiasm, the fortitude of the people of Western North Carolina, they will show up in droves to the polls. I think that first day of early voting, you're going to see things in Western North Carolina we have never seen before. People finding mules and horses and ATVs, whatever it takes to get to the polls to make sure that their voices are heard, because they're seeing firsthand the epic failure of this administration.
Man, people knocked down for a minute, but getting up twice as hard. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Michele Woodhouse, GOP congressional chair for the 11th District in North Carolina. And her show is Point Counterpoint, the Michele Woodhouse Show. NM Woodhouse on the Twitter. Michele, an honor, pleasure. Please, let's talk again. And you say early voting is, next week? You said starts next week, so the 17th?
17th, a week from today. Polls will be open right now, 7:30.
Okay, beautiful. Let's talk right after that, and we'll see how things are going there.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. And thank you so much for having me.
It's an honor. Thank you, Michele. Wonderful.